Hey everybody, welcome back to Monday with Molly. I'm Andrew Kosselman here with Molly Dean. How's it going, Molly?
Good.
Wanted to revisit a topic for you
Okay.
that we talked about a couple years ago.
Okay.
Obviously, it's been a kind of a weird market the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So we have a topic that is becoming more and more popular again that maybe took a little bit of a lull as far as importance goes. And that is, what is the difference between my offer being contingent versus non-contingent?
Okay.
And what does that mean both for the seller and the buyer?
Okay. Contingent means that you are contingent on a house to sell. Non-contingent means you don't necessarily have a house to sell, or you're not contingent on your current home selling. You can buy without that house having to sell.
Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a house to sell. You might own a home.
Correct.
But non-contingent just means selling that home isn't mandatory to be approved for a new mortgage
Correct.
loan.
That
Okay.
is correct.
So what kind of difference does this make from the buyer's side? And then tell me a little bit kind of what difference it makes from the seller's side.
So from the buyer's side, the idea is that you can do whatever without having to wait on someone else to buy, right? So you can buy that dream house and not be concerned about if you have a buyer for your house and if they've gotten to the closing table. As a seller, I talk about hurdles. A seller generally wants the path of least resistance, right? So if they have an offer, there isn't a contingency and they can get to the finish line as fast as possible, they may sway to a non-contingent offer over a contingent offer, again, for path of least resistance.
Sure. But that also, I always talk about, when you talk about hurdles, I always talk about, a pool of buyers, right?
Yes.
And so if a seller says, I'm not taking any contingent offers, you could potentially be shrinking your pool of potential
Absolutely.
buyers.
Absolutely.
Right. So what this plays into is a theme that we talk about all the time, and that is the strength of your pre-approval really can alleviate a lot of those concerns for
Yes.
everybody,
Yes.
right? So if you have a credible lender like yourself
Thank
who
you.
writes a pre-approval that's contingent, a seller with a good agent who maybe knows you here in town says, hey, she wouldn't write that if this borrower was an issue. So this contingency is kind of it's not really something we should heavily evaluate, right?
Right. Yes. And really, it's just talking through the program. Like, why are they? Maybe they already have a buyer on their house. Maybe those T's are crossed, I's are dotted. But we just have to have the conversation on how and why we're approving them these ways.
Yeah, and we've talked other videos in the past about how just because you're non-contingent and maybe your house doesn't sell before you buy a new one, doesn't mean there aren't post-closing options to still address
Correct.
that transaction after
Absolutely.
it closes once your home does sell. So we saw a huge wave of first-time home buyers the last few years get into the market for the first time, which means we're going to have a huge wave of second-time buyers
we are.
as soon as things start to warm back up again as the market goes. So it's just always good to know your options.
Absolutely.
So if I could, a tip for maybe those newer home buyers who are thinking about selling their second home, or their first home to buy their second home, should they be afraid of a contingency?
No, not at all. The one thing I do say though is be ready to sell it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's really easy to find a house to buy. The hardest part of the market is finding a buyer for your house. So if you found a house to buy, you're contingent, and that seller says, hey, we'll accept it, but you have X amount of days, make sure your house is ready to list.
Yeah, and make sure you're realistic about what it's going to list for.
Yeah, have those conversations.
I mean,
with your realtor.
when I bought my first house, obviously I've done so much to it that it probably is mentally worth a little bit more to me than it might actually be worth. So make sure you get with your your realtor,
Yeah.
your agent who's going to assist you so that you can establish kind of what that house is going to be worth.
Yes.
So that once you are ready to pull the trigger, you can move quickly.
Yes. Yep,
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Well, that's all I had for you today, Molly.
Happy Monday.
Have a great week.